Player expectation for Shadow of the Erdtree is beyond calculable. After the sheer success of Elden Ring, each and every one of us is looking forward to an even better and improved experience with the upcoming expansion. Coming from FromSoft and their success with past Soul games, I believe that everyone was expecting Elden Ring to be good. That being said, I also believe that many players did not think it was going to be as good as it turned out. Elden Ring became a game that completely exceeded the already very high expectations that players had for it. And since we're talking about expectations, we cannot ignore just how much players are looking forward to experiencing this DLC. One of the reasons why Elden Ring succeeded in such a fashion is its size. When FromSoft revealed an open-world Souls game, I believe that few of us were expecting what we got. Elden Ring was packed full of content and value right out of the gate, and while experiences may vary from player to player, we can easily calculate an average of 100 hours of content if we are to experience everything the game has to offer for the very first time. So now we are getting a full expansion to this already gigantic game, and the question is obvious. How large will it be? And how much content will it have? Let's get started. While it is truly impossible to know the size of Shadow of the Erdtree with 100% certainty, we do have some information that we can use for some educated predictions. It is more than notorious that Miyazaki gave a few interviews to some media outlets that were released alongside the DLC trailer. We understand that Shadow of the Erdtree will take place in a location separate from the main game, accessible through Miquella's cocoon, called the Land of Shadow. The key here is to understand how large this play area will actually be. Well, first, in an interview with Famitsu, Miyazaki received a comment in which the interviewer mentioned the volume of the DLC and how there were huge expectations for Shadow of the Erdtree. Miyazaki responded to this comment mentioning that it is larger when compared to DLCs from Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne. He continued to say that it is no mistake to say that this is the largest DLC ever. And then, in an interview with IGN, Miyazaki is asked, "Can you approximate the size of the world compared to the world of the base game?" To which he answers that it is probably comparable, if not larger, than the area of Limgrave from the base game. So, we have two pieces of information to work with. First, it is the largest DLC that FromSoft has ever created, and second, it is as large or larger than the area corresponding to Limgrave. My dear viewer, I believe that the path has been set before us. It is imperative that we analyze Limgrave in order to see what we can expect when it comes to the size of Shadow of the Erdtree. The starting point in all of this is the lands between. What you see here is a map of Elden Ring's overworld. It is not complete because, I am sure that you know, there are underground areas not represented on this map. That being said, this map serves the purpose of understanding the general surface area of the game and also letting us locate Limgrave to get a first impression of its size. My dear viewer, this is Limgrave. The whole area is comprised of Limgrave, East Limgrave, the Whipping Peninsula, Stormvale Castle, and the underground areas of Siofra River and Nokron, the Eternal City. As you can see, it is a sizable portion of the map, and we can compare it to other portions of the map. Limgrave looks to be larger than Caelid. It also looks to be larger than the Altus Plateau, and also it looks to be larger than the mountain top of the Giants. In fact, I would argue that Limgrave is the second largest area in the game. Honestly, looking at this map, only Liurnia of the Lake looks to be larger than Limgrave. This is important because we can determine that if the Land of Shadow will be as large or larger than Limgrave, then we can understand that the Land of Shadow will be just as large as the second largest area in the base game. But let's not stop here. If we were to superpose the area of Limgrave over the remaining map of the lands between, then we could see that it will take about 6 Limgraves to fill out the whole map, including its original space. I am sure that you, my dear viewer, are asking, what is the point of this? Well, If it takes 6 Limgraves to fill out the entirety of the surface area of the lands between, then it is easy to calculate that 1 Limgrave makes up approximately 17% of the total surface area of the lands between. This is the initial conclusion. When it comes to surface area, we should expect the DLC to be at least as large as 17% of the total surface area of the lands between. Now, you might be thinking, 17% does not sound like a lot. And you might be right, it doesn't sound like a big number. But you should not focus on the number. We need to understand that we do not have a unit of measurement in Elden Ring. We do not know how many square kilometers or how many square miles the lands between measure. For this reason, we must focus on how large the lands between are as a whole and how much content can fit in this 17% that we have concluded. Remember your first time playing Elden Ring. Now, think that you will be able to relive that experience with an additional 1/6 of extra content. At this time, we have an understanding of the surface area of Limgrave. Now, as mentioned before, we have to also take into consideration the underground areas present below Limgrave. Remember, the sector of Limgrave is made up of Limgrave, East Limgrave, the Whipping Peninsula, Stormvale Castle, Siofra River, and Nokron, the Eternal City. This is important because the size of the expansion will not only be about how large the area is, it is also about the amount of stuff that we will find in it. In other words, the amount of content that will fill this surface area. This is what we call density, and it is extremely important because no one likes a very large but very empty world. In order to understand the possible density of Shadow of the Erdtree, we must once again analyze Limgrave. If the DLC will be as large or larger than Limgrave, then it is logical to assume that it will also be as dense or denser than Limgrave. So, how dense is Limgrave? I must say, Limgrave has a lot of stuff crammed within its borders. I went through absolutely everything that you can pick up, every enemy that you can kill, and every crafting material that you can find. In total, the full area of Limgrave has over 1,000 separate instances in which the player can interact with some kind of content. That being said, the vast majority of this content is crafting materials and mundane items, collecting a Rowa seed, picking up a soul item, hunting a deer for its bones, or, even worse, picking up a purple drop only for it to be an Arteria leaf. Don't get me wrong, Arteria leaves are a top-tier crafting material, but I always get a bit disappointed when I see it show up on my screen. The fact of the matter remains that while we do get over 1,000 different instances of content in Limgrave, most of it is not really fun, and it does not provide a good idea of what to expect from Shadow of the Erdtree. For this reason, we must focus on the content that really matters to the player. I went through the whole area of Limgrave, combed its territory, reviewed my notes, and researched item locations. The objective is to focus on the items that really give the players quality content. As such, we are going to focus on bosses and equipment. This is what I was able to find. In Elden Ring, the area of Limgrave has 40 different bosses. This counts dungeons, legacy dungeons, and field bosses. If a health bar appears on the screen with a name, then it is a boss, and there are 40 separate occasions in which we fight a boss. Furthermore, the area of Limgrave has a total of 258 different pieces of equipment that the player can use. These are classified as follows: 80 pieces of armor belonging to 22 different sets, 31 Ashes of War, 86 different armaments, 21 spells, both sorceries and incantations, 14 spirit ashes, and 26 talismans. Now this, my dear viewer, is content, and it is a lot. All of this content allows the players to begin the construction of many different builds with many different playstyles, and it also gives them a large amount of bosses to try out these different possibilities. Limgrave is absolutely filled with content. In fact, if we were to play through the complete area of Limgrave, doing absolutely everything that it offers, we are talking about an average of 25 hours of gameplay. I am sure that you're asking, how does this apply to Shadow of the Erdtree? Well, if the Land of Shadow is as large or larger than Limgrave, then I also expect it to be as dense or denser than Limgrave. I expect there to be as many bosses, and I expect there to be as much content as Limgrave has. So yes, I expect there to be 40 bosses, with the understanding that there will probably be 8 or 10 main bosses, and the rest will be lesser dungeon bosses or field bosses. I also expect there to be about 250 new pieces of equipment: armor, weapons, spells, ashes of war, spirit ashes, and of course, talismans. All included 250 new pieces. Limgrave is a huge area. It is a huge territory, and it is absolutely filled with content to the top. It is one of the best areas in Elden Ring and probably the best starting territory in any game of its scope. If the DLC is going to be equal to Limgrave, then this is very good news. If Shadow of the Erdtree is going to be as big and as dense as Limgrave, then this is very good news, because Limgrave is fantastic, and that means that Shadow of the Erdtree will be fantastic. The last thing that I want to go over in this video is a matter of philosophy. I am sure that you, my dear viewer, is asking, what happens if the DLC does not have 40 bosses? What happens if it does not have 250 new pieces of equipment? This is a good question, and the answer is, nothing happens. You see, I am an adult. On top of this, I believe that I am an intelligent adult. This means that I understand a very important thing. This video is an expectation that I am setting up for myself based on this speculation rooted on a very limited amount of information. I am well aware that the reality could be different from this expectation, and as such, I will not hold the game responsible for not meeting this expectation that I myself set up. Shadow of the Erdtree did not promise me anything. FromSoft did not confirm anything. That being said, if Miyazaki says that the DLC will be as large or larger than Limgrave, then I will set up an expectation based on what Limgrave is currently offering us. If when the expansion is released on June 21st my expectations are not met, then I will see what the game truly offers and make a judgment based on that reality. This is important to understand because the game of speculation is a dangerous one. We must understand that what we speculate today might not be the reality of tomorrow. No matter how much research I do and how logically I present my arguments, this continues to be just speculation. Again, as an adult, I understand the game that I am playing, so I am able to manage my emotions in preparation for the reality of Shadow of the Erdtree's release. Judgment will be passed after playing the expansion, but for now, once again, if Miyazaki says that the Land of Shadow will be as large or larger than Limgrave, then I am preparing myself for a massive experience filled with many hours of content and gameplay. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that I get to see you on the next one.